But as long as you've done a really good job targeting and you don't have any new information that leads you to believe that this prospect is no longer a good prospect for you, keep going.
Inspiration can happen to any one of us at any moment, but for today's Ask an Expert, her moment was in the women's locker room. Hi, I'm Joshua Carlson, co-founder of Propelo Media, and today I sit down with Caryn Kopp. She is the founder and chief door opener at Kopp Consulting, and if her title didn't give it away, her moment of inspiration was around opening doors. She realized that most companies had a great product, they had a great service, but what they struggled with was opening doors, and so she set about fixing that. Today we're going to talk about the importance of pairing strategic messaging with proven door openers. We're also going to talk about the importance of finding the right contacts and how you actually get their contact information. And finally, we're going to talk about objections and the 3 Ps that you can use to overcome those. Now let's hear what Caryn has to say. Hi, Caryn. I'd like to welcome you to our Ask an Expert.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I love your title. You're the founder and chief door opener at Kopp Consulting. I'd love to go back to the beginning and talk about how this company first came about.
Yeah, it was an idea born in the bathroom of a gym, where all good ideas are born. It's a good
Certainly.
thing I caught you like mid-sip on that. But that is what happened. I had taken a couple years off after my second child was born, and I was starting to think about what do I want to do. My background is consumer packaged goods, brand management, and business development. And I saw a real need out there for people to have others who are really skilled at getting doors open, to get those doors open for them, because most of the time, if you get the door open, people can take it from there. They're pretty good at building relationships. They're pretty good at closing. It's the getting the door open piece that seems to be so elusive for people, and it stops business development. So I thought, well, gee, like how would it be if I got somebody in the door with their clients? So there's this lady who called out in the bathroom of this gym, hey, I have a promotion agency. Does anybody want any part-time work? And I had been thinking about this. So I come out of the stall and I said to her, you know, I have this business idea. I was going to get clients in the door with their prospects for the first meeting. How helpful would that be for you? And she just stopped in her tracks, her jaw dropped, and she said, you could do that? You would do that for me? And I said, yes, we could. And so she said, okay, when can you start? And the next client was at the pool, same thing. You know, what are you going to do with your free time now that your son's going into nursery school? So I told him, and he said, you could do that? You would do that for me? And then the next client was at the kindergarten welcome lunch. Well, fast forward, these little children at the time are now 23 and 25 years old. So this is our 21st year in business. We work across industries, getting our clients in, usually at the executive level. That's where people hire us to get them in the big doors, the difficult doors, where it's a competitive industry, consultative sale, difficult to explain, hard to get in. That's where people end up on my doorstep.
Okay, and so going back to that beginning, you see this woman, she has this need, this promotions, you pair up with her. What was it like going from zero to actually having kind of, you know, a brick and mortar business? Like how did that process evolve for you?
Well, it was an evolution, that's for sure. I mean, I guess my third client, I can share with you that story. When they came to us, I met her at the kindergarten welcome lunch. It was a meeting planning company. They targeted pharmaceuticals. They were the 5th largest meeting planning company in Italy and came here to the US to start a business. A family of 4, they made $12,000 in their first year. So they had to have help or they wouldn't have been able to stay here. That's how critical this was. And the fact that I met her at the kindergarten welcome lunch was serendipity. Same thing. You could do that for me. So we started doing that. They went from $12,000 in sales to $5 million in 3 years, but coming from the big pharmaceutical companies at that time, which is just like a drop in the bucket versus what they could have. So in the early years, I was the door opener.
Okay.
It's by far my favorite thing to do, and I don't get to do it anymore because now I run the company.
Sure.
But as we were growing, when I had more clients than time available, I had to hire someone. And that was like the first big decision. Do I hire a low-level person and then train them and manage them? And then if it doesn't work out, fire them and have like this big level of supervision? Or do I hire a senior level business developer who, like me, who could just step in and take over a project and get it done?
Right.
Well, in the early years, remember, my kids were in nursery school, so I was working part-time. I had my own clients that I was servicing. So I went with a senior level business developer. I actually hired the person who replaced me in my last business development job. And that was the first hire. I handed her the project. She knew exactly what to do, very minimal level of oversight needed. And that became our business model. So we only hire senior level business developers.
Okay.
Everybody here has a minimum of 10 years experience in business development, but most of them have more like 15 or 20. And many have been corporate decision makers too. So
Sure.
when you hand that person an assignment, they know what to do.
Right.
So that was like the first major evolution of the business. The next major evolution came when I needed to scale. And I learned, it was a big surprise to me actually, I learned that when you have these senior level people, not everybody can figure out the exact words and phrases to use to get the difficult doors open. But if you do that messaging ahead of time with certain people who are, it's not even trained, because there's really no job that exists like this anywhere. I know you know what I'm talking about. Yep. But people have it in their DNA. So if you can have messaging strategists who know how to get the doors open, figure out what the exact language is to pique the interest of the right executives, and then you pass that, not as a script, because life doesn't happen as a script, but you pass that to these senior level door openers, then they know what to do with it. Okay. And so it became clear that I had to separate these functions and have messaging strategy in addition to door openers. Okay. That was a big surprise to me, because I was able to figure it out. I just figured everybody could figure out. Yeah. But that's not true. Right. And so there are certain people who hire, the companies, they hire their own people, and they expect these people to figure it out, and they can't. And then really successful salespeople flounder in a position where if their management only provided the messaging, they wouldn't flounder, right? So that was our next major evolution. And then, I could go on and on with what happened when technology became more sophisticated and all of that, but we'll take the conversation where you want to go.
Okay, well, so I want to go back and go back to that decision where you're looking at, hey, do I hire somebody that is more junior, and do I train them up, or do I get somebody that's incredibly seasoned? Obviously, there's risk with both of those. And hindsight, looking back, it's clear that you probably made the best decision, but it also probably was a more expensive decision. So what was the deliberation process? I mean, was it a decision that you knew instantly, or is it something that you struggled with for a while?
Oh, I struggled with that, sure, because look at the difference in what I'm able to make. Look at the difference in what I was able to charge for those services. When you hire senior people, you have to charge more, but actually the risk becomes lower, because you don't have to be on top of them. Like when I think about the clients who have come to me after they've tried to hire their own, and I mean, hiring somebody who does door opening internally in a company is the most common form of sales mishire, because it's a really hard person to hire. It's not just about the experience, it's about the DNA.
Yeah.
And most people don't understand, like, if they haven't done it themselves, it's really hard to know, not the questions, because I can hand somebody the questions. They have to know the answers.
Yeah,
And if
right.
you haven't lived this, you don't necessarily know the right answers,
Right.
So when those clients come to me after trying to hire their own salespeople, or moving customer service people into a sales role, or technical people into a sales role, and trying to get them to do these things, and all of these things don't produce the results they want, they've spent more money than if they hired us in the first place to get it done right the first time. And not just the money that they've wasted, but it's the time, right? Because it usually takes people 6 months to realize they have the wrong hire.
Right.
Right. And if they don't know how to hire this position, they could wait the first 6 months, fire the person, do it again, another 6 months, and then they've just delayed their sales cycle, right? And their
Yeah.
ability to close more sales. So it was less risky for me to hire somebody who was senior. And most importantly, at the time, I didn't have more time to
Mm.
be able to do all this recruiting, and then all the training, and then the management and all of that. I needed somebody who could operate independently. And that's what this person was able to do because of the seniority. And then everybody else we brought in was just like that. They have senior level business developers. Most of them have been corporate decision makers, but heavy on the getting in the door with people they don't know.
Right.
Like if a seller is somebody who has been incredibly successful leveraging their own network, I don't need them here. I could get lots of people like that.
Yeah.
What I can't get lots of are people who can develop a relationship where none exists before.
Correct.
That is the door opener. That is the only kind of person we hire here.
Right. Well, you used a word, and I think it's understated, and it's actually something that I've heard Jack Daly when he talked about your organization, which is investment. Because I do think so many people think of this as an expense, but the reality is, no, you're investing, which does lower the risk because you're investing in higher quality, which is going to, net out to higher return. And I just don't think people focus on that enough.
And not just the higher quality, but here we have a focus on the strategy of the initiative. So our number one core value is figure it out. Our job is to figure out where our clients need to focus. Sometimes they know, and sometimes they don't know. Where do they need to focus? What do we need to say? What groups of prospects are going to deliver more traction than others? And then after we launch, we're constantly policing that and bringing that information, those insights from the market, back to our client. We have our messaging strategists, and then we also have the door opener, both very senior level people who are constantly brainstorming with each other on how to increase meetings for time spent. Where are you going to get that? Like, if you have a sales manager internally who may or may not have ever done this job before, and then you have somebody else who's trying to figure it out, where are the insights coming from?
Right.
So we're able to have more conversations out there in the market with our clients' key prospects than they can, because we have the bandwidth to do it, we have the experience to do it, and then we can bring them back the recommendations of how to refine that right recipe.
Sure. So I want to shift gears a little bit. We're in an interesting time of social change right now, and it certainly feels different than any other period that I've personally been a part of. And so I wanted to put the focus on you as a woman leader, as a business owner that is a woman. What has it personally meant to you to take on that role? And it's maybe not something that you thought of at the beginning, but it certainly is something that is no doubt been a role model for many women over a great period of time, because as you mentioned, you've been in this business for over 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I never, as you said, I never thought about the fact that I was a woman business owner versus a business owner. I was just doing things that help people to stay in business, to grow their business, because I have this unique talent, and I am able to hire people who also have this unique talent that is so incredibly important to these businesses that we support, whether they're big businesses, middle-sized, small businesses, whether they have a sales team or they don't. So I never really thought about it as woman versus man. I've never felt that I didn't get in places or wasn't chosen for something because I was a woman. I never felt that. I know other people do. I personally never felt that before. But the one thing I will say is that I support not just other women business owners. I support anybody who has a good idea, who wants to get out there to the market, and they may be an expert in what they do, but they don't necessarily know the right path. We call it the path to the cash. They don't know the right path to the cash. So why would I not share that information with them? Even if they never need us for door opening, I don't care. Of course, I'd prefer they use us for door opening, but that's okay, because if I can save somebody years and enable them to be successful, enable them to stay in this country, and like that third client I had, and support their family because of what I know, that I'm happy to help people do that. And, you know, I'm a member of WPO, Women's Presidents Organization. I'm also a member of EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. I'm a winner of the Enterprising Women Award. And I give back by training other women business owners and sharing what I know. You know, so I'm happy to do that if it will help people to not make the mistakes that others have made that cost them opportunities and time.
Well, I think it's a good core value that you're talking about here, which is the word help. And it's just helping. You know, if you see an opportunity where you can make a difference, stepping up and doing that, regardless of who you are, what your background is,
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. I'd like to shift to strategy, and you've touched on it already, but I want to just delve a little bit deeper. You focus on opening these doors, right? And specifically, as you mentioned, I could hire somebody that has a network, but we're looking for people outside of their network. We're looking for that special gift. And you talked about this two sides of the coin, and I just want to dig a little bit deeper. You've got the strategy side, right? And you've got the individual that is really focused on the message. And then you've got the actual door opener, right? That maybe has that DNA, the gift of gab, if you may, that can persuade and have a conversation. Is it as simple as those two-sided things, or is there a deeper aspect of it that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, the other piece of it is the process to it. So it is the focus on who you're going to talk to and what you're going to say, whether you're writing it or you're emailing it to one individual. And then it is the individual who's delivering that message, who is the door opener. And then the other piece of it is that right process that the door opener uses. Is it an email? Is it a phone call? How many phone calls, how many emails, how much time is spent, that whole process. We were coaching one of our clients' salespeople, and he wasn't really getting anywhere. And our door opener kind of looked under the hood and said, let me see your emails, leave me a voicemail, let's do a role play. And then those things needed work, you know, too. But the primary problem was the fact that he was leaving 20 messages for one person in 1 week.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to work.
Right.
And then on the other side, you have somebody who might have some time on a Friday, and that person will call 10 people, but then that person gets busy and doesn't call those 10 people again for another 3 months. Well, you might as well go to the movies, you know, or go take some time off because you just wasted time, and it was pretty disrespectful for those 10 people to not actually call them back and provide them any value. So the process of that, when do you give up on a prospect, which I have my own philosophy on that, and that whole piece of it, what do you say on the second reach out, on the 5th reach out, on the 20th reach out, that's going to make a difference in that person's life, and to make that person feel that knocking 3 people off his calendar and making room for you is the best decision he's going to make all week. You know, there's those pieces.
So let's talk about in our organization, we'd use the process as another word is just the cadence.
Mhm.
And I would actually like to hear your philosophy on when you should give up on someone, because I do think it's an interesting, it's a dilemma, right? Because it's semi-philosophical until you actually execute and you prove it out on your own process. But a lot of times I feel like you never knew how close you were to actually breaking through. So
That's
A,
right.
what's your philosophy on giving up? And B, what do you find is kind of the sweet spot as far as, hey, it takes 3 months to get the door open, or it takes 27 touches? What have you guys found to be most effective?
Yeah, so those two things are actually linked with each other.
Okay.
So from a first perspective, when do you give up on a prospect? As long as you've done a really good job in narrowing your target group
Mm-hmm.
so that you're only targeting those people who would find you to be three things, find you to be an obvious solution,
Okay.
who would feel urgency around having a conversation with you and taking next steps, and somebody who would willingly pay what you want to charge for your services. It's
Yeah.
those three pieces in addition to all the other good stuff like size of company level, decision
Sure.
maker, geography, and all those other good things. But as long as you've done a really good job targeting and you don't have any new information that leads you to believe that this prospect is no longer a good prospect for you, keep going.
Okay.
Keep going, because when you first reach out, they may not have a need for you, but 3 months later they might. And if you're no longer talking to your prospect, somebody else is. And
Yeah.
all that work that you did to open up that awareness and to start the ball rolling with the relationship,
Yep.
even if you don't talk to somebody, a relationship is forming, awareness is forming, an impression is forming. Then when that person is ready to go and you're nowhere around, they're going to choose your competitor. And
Yeah.
you've done a very nice job educating your prospect for your competitor. So it really is, keep trying, and you could believe that your competition won't. I mean, they used to come to us with these lists of prospects from A to Z, right?
Yeah.
And I would say to everybody, okay, start with G. Don't start with the A's, because everybody starts with the A's.
Yeah.
Don't start with the Z's, because sometimes people flip it.
Right.
But by the time you get to G, your competition isn't working anymore.
Right.
They've thrown the whole thing out because they don't stay with it. And I find it, like I said before, very disrespectful to the prospect. And I'll give you a personal example, actually.
Okay.
Back when I was doing the door opening for that meeting planning company that I was
Yep.
talking about, we didn't even have Excel spreadsheets at that point. We were working with binders, and no CRM existed at that point.
Right.
And so we were working with the binders, and I was going through and I was making the calls, and I got to this one person at Fortune, I think it's a 100 company in New Jersey. I think there's only 2 or 3 of them, so you could probably guess which one it was. But anyway, I get to this one person. It was 2 years that I had been reaching out to this person. I'd spoken to her periodically,
Okay.
and she's like, you know what, there's no opportunity here. And believe me, I study answers for objections.
Okay.
I had tried many different avenues, and she's just like, there's not an opportunity here. Thank you for your call. Like, all these different times I send information and I give her case studies and examples and all of this. And we had a nice relationship coming up to that, but the meeting hadn't happened yet. So it's 2 years later. I flip the page and there it is. This one person's name, let's call her Sally, right? I see Sally's name and I think to myself, I have to be crazy. At what point do you just say enough is enough and
Right.
not call? But the thing is that I'm a very methodical person. My experience is that the best sellers are incredibly methodical, like maniacally methodical
Right.
people. So I couldn't skip over her name. Like, it physically hurt me to turn the page. So I call her and she answers the phone that day. And she said, Caryn, I'm so glad you called. This is your lucky day. Things have changed. There is now an opportunity and I want you to come in for the meeting. And so that day, because we don't typically accompany our clients on the meetings, except for now,
Sure.
virtually we do. So
Okay.
when it is a virtual meeting, my door opener is always on the meeting with our client.
Yeah.
But that was an in-person meeting. And I said to my client, I'm going. I have to see what this lady looks like after all these years. But that paved the way for that first meeting for my client. After 2 years, my client got that business. And later that Fortune 100 company merged with a Fortune 500 company.
Mhm.
And this was the vendor of choice. Now, had I not made the call on that day, my client would have never had that meeting. They never would have been the vendor for the Fortune 100 company. When there
Sure.
was that merger, they wouldn't have been the vendor of choice, all because I stayed with it and I made that phone call. So, my philosophy is, as long as you have the right prospects on your list and no new information that leads you to believe they're not the right prospects, keep going, keep going.
Well, that's fantastic. As an agency, we believe in data first, right? So start with the data and really make sure that the target audience is aligned to what your
Yes.
service or what your product is. So I'm curious, as you work with clients, do you help them identify the right target audience?
Yes.
Or, okay, so, and then the follow-up question to that is, when you guys, maybe you've started and you say, hey, we think that this sector is perfect for your guys' business, we're going to start. Are there instances where you're in the process, you're utilizing your process, and maybe, the salesperson is saying, hey, this isn't working. The strategy's not right. The message isn't right. Do we have to pivot? How often does that happen?
It doesn't happen often, but it happens sometimes. And it's
Okay.
not usually the client's person who's saying it, it's my person.
Okay.
Because we know what traction feels like.
Yeah.
And if we feel like we're on the mountaintop shouting and nobody is hearing us, then we're bringing that
Something's off.
information back to the client and saying,
Right.
listen, this target group is not delivering. Like if we have, let's say, 2 different target groups that we're focused on, and one is delivering and one isn't, we'll come back to the client and say, this one is delivering and that one isn't. We feel like you should either reduce the amount of time we're spending on this or just eliminate it and let's focus elsewhere. It happens sometimes. Like people think that their offering is just awesome. And many times it is. But the thing is that not everybody is going to pay for an awesome offering, right? You have to sell something that people actually want to pay for. And so finding that narrow group of prospects that will pay for it willingly. Remember, we talked about willingly pay for what you want to charge for your services. Also, we have to find that group of people first. So that's where the strategy comes in, which I'm sure you guys are doing too.
Yep.
A lot of people are just like, no, just make the calls. And it's like, no, well, let's figure out who we're going to talk to and what we're going to say. So we're not, ready, fire, aim instead of ready, aim, fire.
Okay. And on the messaging side, where do you guys, obviously you're seasoned vets at this point, but when you get a new client that's maybe outside of your wheelhouse or it's just a new sector that you guys haven't done business with, what is the process to developing good messaging when you're starting from scratch?
Yeah. So it's a new recipe every time.
Okay.
Even clients in the same industry are successful for different reasons. And they are targeting different groups of people who need to hear something different in order to be responsive. And I want to be careful with that word different because differentiation is an overused word that means very little. So there are a lot of times people are spending a lot of time trying to figure out why they're different when actually their prospect group doesn't care at all why they're different. The prospects only care why a company or a person is of more value. That's all they care about. And if you can communicate that to that group of people and to the individual specifically, then you win. If you can't communicate that, you don't win. So what is the process when we start with a new client? We have them fill out a questionnaire that asks certain questions. Like we don't have to know everything about a client in order to be successful for them. We have to know certain things about why somebody would take a meeting. We're selling the idea of the meeting.
Okay.
So we have them fill out that questionnaire. It talks about who they don't want as much as who they do want.
Yeah.
We do research ahead of time, and then we have a couple of strategy calls in week one. First, to drill deep on the filters associated with who are the right clients. And then we can develop the list if they need us to, or they can give us the list. But the list has to be in alignment with the strategy. That's the important part there. And then we start talking about the issues and challenges those people would face, and why would they go outside their sphere to talk to someone new when if they have a need, they have a vendor. They
Yeah.
probably know 3 other people who can do the same thing, and one of them is their cousin Vinny. So why should they take a meeting anyway with our client? And that's our job, is to figure that out. That is the job of the messaging strategist in our company, who can't be just a marketing person who's never done sales and certainly not door opening. It has to be somebody who's had hands-on experience, who could say that objection answer is never going to work. Like, we have to know that before we launch. And then we launch with the strongest messaging possible, with the list that's closest to being right. And then we learn from the market, and then we make adjustments after that.
Okay, so let's talk about objections, because I think that that's something that is really underutilized or underfocused by a lot of organizations. You mentioned it with your personal experience with this Sally. What are the ways that you guys have developed and gotten seasoned at overcoming objections? Because, like I said, I think it's something that's under focused by a lot of salespeople.
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, how much time do you have? And the second of all, there are a lot of times when somebody is answering an objection that they don't have to answer, because they're not targeting the right people. So if you add a filter to the group of people you're targeting, you may remove an entire objection that's wasting time. So there's an efficiency component of this, which is critical. And as you said, people don't think about objections, but they also don't think about this. Like, how do I reduce the amount of time I'm facing that objection in the first place by narrowing a group of prospects so we're not facing that objection? The same is true of the messaging. If you're facing an objection often, and we encourage people to track how often they're facing a particular objection, because if it's coming up over and over and over again, they may be able to do something different in the target or the message to reduce that or eliminate that objection. We call this, it's called the objection makeover. I do it in the seminars that I do. But anyway, when we're doing a door opening for a client, we're getting them ready, we're looking at this. So is there a way to reduce the number of times you get an objection, or eliminate it entirely, by saying something different up front in the messaging, so it gets it off the table to begin with? And I'll give you an example. So in our business, we are not the low price solution on the block. We are not the people who hire the people coming out of college, or an actor with a good voice, or a mom who's home during the day who just likes to talk on the phone. There are companies that are like that, and that's fine, and they serve a purpose for certain clientele. But they would never be able to get the doors open for our clientele, who want to get in with executives in companies to sell something that's more of a consultative kind of a sale, right? For that, you need a senior level person. Well, somebody doesn't always think about that ahead of time when they come to us, and they may think that this is a $10 an hour telemarketing service. And I'll say exactly that. This is not your $10 an hour telemarketing service. And if that's what you're looking for, this is not the place. So like, I take that right in the message and I get it off the table, so that people can self-select out if that's all that they're looking for, or they can understand that moving forward and having the conversation, that's just not who we are. And that's not what they need anyway, if I've done a good job targeting. So that just gives you an example of that. So that's how to reduce or eliminate the objections. But then for the times that you're going to get them anyway, first of all, I tell people, be prepared. People will walk into an objection or any selling scenario without actually thinking about the objections they're going to face.
Yeah.
Well, that's I mean, it's not just disrespectful to the prospect, it's disrespectful to yourself. Like protect your own time. And it just takes a couple of minutes to think about what objections you're going to face, because if you can pre-think those objections, you can also prepare the answers. So we say there are 3 P's when it comes to objection answers: pre-think, prepare, and practice. If you can pre-think them, you can prepare the answers, but they can't just be any answers, they have to be the right answers.
Sure.
So you have to think about how those answers are going to land when somebody hears them. When your prospect, this individual, hears your response,
Yep.
which can come in the form of a sentence, it could come in the form of a question. When that person hears your response, what is that person's response going to be? And if that person's going to say, you're right, we should keep talking, you're close to being ready.
Right.
But if there's a shadow of a doubt that that person isn't going to say, yeah, you're right, let's keep talking, then you are not finished thinking of the exact right answer for that objection. So it's pre-think, prepare, and the last P is practice, because it has to come out conversationally. I had my first cold calling job when I was 11. The family I babysat for had a lawn doctor franchise. And the mother said to me, hey, you have a good phone voice. Why don't you sit in one of our cubicles and make calls to people out of the phone book at the time and see if you can get some free lawn evaluations for us. So I was like, okay, I'll try that. And I sat down and she hands me this big book of objection answers. She says, this is how to use it. When you hear an objection, you flip the book open to the tab where the objection is, and you scroll your finger down and find out where you are and start reading the answer. Well, this was clearly given to me by somebody who had never actually made a call at all, because it only took me at 11 years old 3 calls to realize that that was never going to work.
That doesn't work for you. Yeah, right.
No, you have to be conversational.
Yeah.
It's not just about learning the messaging, you have to internalize it. So actually, when our door openers are getting ready to launch a program, we will have a role play internally between the door opener and the messaging strategist, because the door opener has to demonstrate proficiency in being able to have a conversation, a what if conversation that can pivot in a split second to go this way or that way and still get an outcome, right? And for that, you have to internalize it and know it cold, so that you can dig for things. And then also there are objections that you don't anticipate, and you have to be good at those too.
Yep.
Right? So there's also that listening component and being in it, in a conversation that could be all over inside of 3 minutes. And then you don't get another chance. That's what I say to my people all the time.
So I love the practice of that 3rd P, because what I think is interesting is that there was a sales guru within real estate that I traveled with for a limited time, and he was speaking to a crowd, and he said he sold more houses to one person than all of the other clients that he had combined. And he asked the audience, can you guess who that was? And there was one person who guessed right, and it was his wife. He'd practiced selling houses to his wife until he got it dialed into the point where he could go out and sell, and he could field any answer or any question. And it was through that practice with his wife that he was able to secure that and become comfortable and conversational. So I feel like one of the challenges that we face is the larger the organization, the harder it is to find the right person. Mm-hmm. What's the trick to actually identifying? Because we talked about targeting earlier and how important that is, but what is the trick to finding the right person to have that conversation with?
Right. Well, it starts, like we said before, with the filters, the criteria, right? And then you have to find the people who match the criteria. Now, that comes in a lot of different budget sizes. So you can, on the high end, you can subscribe to a service like ZoomInfo, which was acquired by Discover.org, where They are strategic partners of ours, and you are a client of theirs as well. And they have a data service where you can go online and plug in the criteria, and it will spit you out a list of people with their phone and email who
Sure.
meet that criteria. If you don't have a service like that, you don't have the budget for it, you can go online. I don't recommend going to a company's website. A lot of people spin their wheels and waste their time there. Most companies are not putting the names of the people with the contact information there.
Right.
LinkedIn Sales Navigator is also a good way to go, but it doesn't always give you the contact information.
Okay.
On the very low end of the budget spectrum, you can go to your public library, and your library card will often give you a subscription to a service where you can look up information.
Okay.
It may not give you all the pieces you need, and it's not going to be the quality of the data that you would get through a Zoom info, but that is a low-cost way to get that information as well. But my recommendation is to start with somebody's phone and email. If you can find it, if you can find direct dial, it's even better. If you can't find direct dial, you can get the main number of the company. Now, so people will say, well, wait a minute, I can get the main number of the company, but right now people are working virtually.
Right.
So it's impossible to reach people. Not true. When people say that to me, I'm like, really? Did you try? Because it's actually easier now than it used to be to reach somebody, because the main numbers, you can dial in to get somebody's direct dial, and you get into their voicemail. It's rolling right over into their cell phone, and people are answering their cell phones.
Right.
So whereas like 12 weeks ago, or 16 weeks ago now, calling somebody's cell phone for the first time that you're trying to reach them was pretty intrusive.
Sure.
Whereas now it's okay, and people are okay with that. So for the people who are saying they're not reaching people, I say, did you try?
Right.
Because it's possible. So start out with the phone and email, and then of course there's LinkedIn. You can link in with them, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. There's a right way and a wrong way to reach out to any of these people, right? And so if you're going to do this and you want to create a relationship with someone, do your homework. Reach out to them and say something meant just for them. And people are pretty savvy. They know when it's not you. Right? They know when it's not you. And I'm not saying never do that, because from an awareness building perspective, they can see your name, your company name. But if you want a relationship with somebody, that is a one-to-one sales initiative.
Sure.
That people are trying to automate. You can't automate a personal relationship with somebody. You actually have to call them.
Right. Yeah. If it's somebody that's worth calling on, then it's somebody that you should be personal with. I'm curious from the standpoint, so we've talked about the different methods where we can maybe get contact information, but is there a rhyme or reason to actually just identifying the right type of person within an organization? Because I do feel like sometimes you think, hey, I should be targeting the CMO, where actually it's the COO that you should be targeting, because they're the ones that oversee, whatever service or product it is that you offer. What is that process like?
Well, I mean, you want to find out who the highest level right person is.
Okay.
And if you should be talking on the operations side, you want to go there. But sometimes a decision is made by many different groups.
Right.
And what we would call your point of entry, you can go in on the marketing side, or you can go in on the operations side. You just need to say something different to each of them.
Sure.
Who has the authority to make that decision? And that might change within each of the companies. If you don't know, then you're navigating. We would call that navigation.
Okay.
And you have to be good at navigating. And not everybody is good at navigating.
Right.
They might just stick with one person and not realize that that's just the beginning. And you have to lay the foundation there in order to get the referral over to someone else.
Sure.
And then lay the foundation there. We like to start at the top. We find that is the most expeditious way of finding the right person, is to start out at the top. the conversation may not even belong there. That's okay. Be really good at explaining to somebody's assistant what you're looking for.
Okay.
And don't say who buys such and such, because then you're going to purchasing,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Who
Procurement.
initiates requests for?
Right.
And then you'll be directed to the right person. I actually, when people were working in offices, we like to ask to be transferred, because then it would show up on the caller ID as an internal call from somebody a couple levels above them.
Right.
And they were pretty quick to take those calls. Now with the remote, it doesn't always work the same way.
Okay. Well, we've talked about different channels. We've talked about phone. We've talked about email, which I feel going back 16 weeks has maybe become a bit tiresome, but obviously you've opened, my eyes to the fact that, hey, rollovers are happening to mobile phones. So you're actually getting
Oh yeah.
a higher batting average. We talked about LinkedIn Navigator, which is the kind of feels like the obvious answer to, hey, here's a new channel where you can reach out to somebody within business. Are there other channels or are there other mediums that you're seeing right now being effective? And we did touch on it earlier. You mentioned video conferencing. How much of that are you able to get during this, kind of door opening process? What are you seeing right now?
Well, the video conference, that's really the meeting.
Okay.
Once a meeting is set, it's
Okay.
happening on video.
Okay.
And that's one of the things for the business leaders who are tuning into this call,
Yep.
that you need to be sure that either you or your sellers are really capable of
Sure.
having a meeting by video. Because what's really interesting is that before we were all working remotely, right? If there was a conference call, people would usually tune in by just dialing in.
Yep.
Now it's video. The prospects are craving it. People are craving this human communication. They
Right.
want to see you. There's no water cooler anymore.
Correct.
And they are showing up on video. 90% of the calls, the prospect meetings that we're having, as well as what our clients are having, the prospects are showing up on video. If you don't, it's almost as if you're hiding something, like you're
Right.
multitasking, or you just don't want to be seen on video.
Yes.
You have to be seen on video. You have to be ready. You have to know how to share your screen. You have to help them with their tech, right? If you have a half an hour meeting and 10 minutes of tech problems, then that's 20 minutes you have left. How are you
Right.
going to get what you need to get done in that 20 minutes? You have to be really adept at that. One of the things we're doing now is that when our door openers are scheduling meetings, we're asking for the prospect's cell phone number if we don't have it already. Because if the tech fails, you can easily switch to different tech.
Yep.
But the reality is that the tech may fail, the tech may not fail, but now we have the cell phone number and the ability to communicate that way with permission. That's
Sure.
a huge deal. When you started this question, I think what you were asking me was, are we calling people on video for the very first time? No, we're not calling people on video for the very first time. We're calling them on through their phone, whether it's the cell phone or a office phone, or whatever they happen to have that's rolling into their home office right now, and on email, but an email that doesn't look like mass email.
Okay.
It can't look like mass email if you're sending something personal to somebody. Otherwise, it will just get missed in the sea of email that they have. That's why the phone and email combo is so important. And then you can also message somebody through LinkedIn. Like, those are the different ways to do things.
Okay.
There are some companies, like promotional products companies, where they're used to sending lumpy mail. Not so easy anymore, because you
Right.
need somebody's remote address, which means you have to talk to them first. So you have to make that phone call. I find that sellers, many people, not just the sellers, like to hide behind email, and they don't want to make the calls. But I don't know about you as a leader in your company, but my email's blowing up. I have 150, 200 emails every single day. And if I see the word COVID again, I'm going to jump out the window, right? It just means that they don't know me if they're writing that. But for all those people who are trying to sell me things through email, none of them are calling me. None of them are calling. So for the person who actually picks up the phone and does a good job with phone,
Right.
they have a greater share of voice than the people who aren't using that media. So it's the phone, the email done well,
Yep.
LinkedIn done well. Those are the channels that are working when it's one-to-one.
And I'm hearing something that reminds me of something that my mother taught me years ago, which is quality over quantity. So it
Yes.
sounds like, with this need to be more personal, it sounds like a big part of your philosophy is, hey, rather than saying we're going to take on a whole industry, we're really going to cherry pick the ones that we think are the best fits. And then once we've identified those, we're going to really take the time and the care to really personalize this, really make this valuable.
That's
And
right.
I feel like what's interesting is if we just thought about what we would want, those two line up perfectly. But we
Yes, they
just,
do.
and you talked about it earlier, you said something to the effect of, hey, we all think our product's great. We're in love with our service. We're fantastic, but we just don't think about it from this standpoint of who it is that we're talking or targeting. And if we did, we'd be able to go so much further.
Right. Not everybody's going to be right for you. So
Right.
what if you were only talking to those people who would feel
Right.
just as strongly about you as you felt about them? Then your close ratio is higher also.
Sure.
And
Okay.
sales just becomes a lot more fun in that case.
Which is, if you can keep it in fun, I mean, right?
That's
That's
right.
everyone's goal. And we're both smiling, so obviously we're enjoying what we're doing. Is there anything else that you think is important that maybe we haven't touched on right now that you'd like to share with leaders out there today?
I think that, and this is a big theme in the seminars that I'm doing this seminar lately, building and rebuilding your sales pipeline in a virtual world,
Okay.
which is so important. And I see people who are feeling stymied out there and they're thinking and thinking and thinking, and then they never actually execute.
Right.
So it's really critical that people execute
Okay.
instead of just thinking about it. Because if they think about it, they prepare different parts of their website, they have all these other pieces that are done, but then they never actually make the calls and stick with it.
Right.
You didn't really help yourself. So do it is a big message from me. Just do it. And don't wait. Don't wait till things get back to normal,
Sure.
because normal isn't going to be normal for a long time, if ever. So don't wait until people go back to the office. Really think about your prospects as people. Their needs have changed also. Their life's changed too, not just yours.
Right.
Their life's changed too, and they need you right now. Just do it. Call them and have these conversations.
Well, I love it because one of my favorite corporate taglines forever has been Nike's "Just do it."
That's right.
I've often converted it to say, just do something, right? But if you're sitting on the sidelines, nothing is going to happen. So get involved. But I think your message is important right now, and I think it's timeless, really. Which is, you have to execute, you have to follow through, you have to be consistent, because without that, somebody else will be. Right?
Right. Your
You talked about
competitors
earlier.
will eat your lunch. Yes.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
Caryn, I want to thank you so much. This has been incredibly informative. Really had a good time today, and would actually love to have you back on again in the future.
Would love to do that.
Okay, thank you very much.